Alex Eala is winning bigger matches, climbing higher, and attracting bigger crowds. And somehow, that has created a strange problem. The more people celebrate her, the more criticism seems to appear around her name. Look at the contrast. On one side, Eala is beating players like Naomi Osaka and Jessica Pegula. Philippine flags appear throughout the stands. Fans travel to tournaments just to watch her. A young Filipina player is becoming impossible for the tennis world to ignore. Then you open social media. The conversation changes. Too much hype. Overrated. Annoying fans. Crowds that are too loud. Comparisons that go too far. Arguments between supporters and critics. And eventually, some of that frustration reaches Eala herself. So here is the question. What exactly did Alex Eala do to deserve that reaction? That is where this story gets strange. There has been no massive scandal defining her rise. No explosive controversy that obviously explains why people would suddenly turn against her. Yet the backlash keeps appearing, and it seems to become louder as the Eala effect becomes bigger. So what if much of the hate is not really about Alex Eala? What if people are reacting to everything growing around her? The hype, the national pride, the comparisons, the most extreme members of her fan base, and an online environment where conflict often travels faster than context. Because once an athlete becomes famous enough, people stop reacting only to the athlete. They start reacting to everything surrounding her. The supporters, the expectations, the media attention, the arguments, the predictions. And eventually, the athlete in the middle of all that noise can become the target. So is Alex Eala actually becoming more hated? Or is she simply becoming famous enough that every opinion about her is getting louder? That difference changes the entire story. Chapter 1. The Eala Effect. Before we talk about the backlash, one thing needs to be clear. Alex Eala did not become famous because of controversy. She became famous because she started winning. For casual tennis fans, the easiest way to understand her rise is through the names she started beating. Naomi Osaka, Jessica Pegula, players with years of recognition and enormous fan bases of their own. When a young player beats one famous opponent, people notice. When she does it again, people start asking questions. When her ranking rises while the crowds become louder, she stops feeling like a temporary surprise. She becomes part of the conversation. That is where Alex Eala is now. But for Filipino supporters, the story means even more. Eala is not simply another young player trying to move up the WTA rankings. She represents something much more personal. The Philippines has enormous sporting passion, but women's singles tennis has never had a long tradition of producing players competing near the highest levels of the global game. That gives every major Eala result additional meaning. A big victory can feel historic. A ranking milestone can feel national. A win over a famous opponent can become a shared moment for people who have waited years to see a Filipina player stand on this kind of stage. That emotional connection becomes especially visible in North America. Filipino communities are spread across major cities in the United States and Canada. So when Eala arrives at a tournament, she is not always entering a neutral environment. Philippine flags appear. Fans call her name. People wait for autographs. Supporters arrive wearing national colors. Sometimes the atmosphere begins to feel closer to a home match. That is one of the most powerful parts of the Eala effect. But it also creates the first complication. The bigger the support becomes, the harder it becomes to separate Alex Eala from everything said and done in her name. Because there are really three different things happening. There is Alex Eala. There are ordinary fans who simply enjoy watching her and want her to succeed. And there is a much smaller group of extremely vocal people online. Those groups are not the same. But on social media, they can quickly become mixed together. One exaggerated comment becomes evidence against an entire fan base. One aggressive post makes neutral fans roll their eyes. One argument spreads beyond the people who started it. Then the frustration begins moving toward Eala. That is where the problem starts. An athlete cannot control every person who uses her name. She cannot control every comparison. She cannot control every emotional reaction after a victory. She cannot control every prediction about her future. But once her name becomes big enough, she can still be judged for all of it. And that creates a new kind of pressure. At first, Eala only had to deal with the opponent across the net. Now another match is happening outside the court. One side says she is the future. Another side says she is overhyped. One group celebrates every milestone. Another group waits for a loss. Some criticize her tennis. Some criticize her fans. Some criticize the media attention. And all of it becomes attached to one name, Alex Eala. That is why the Eala effect is becoming more complicated. The bigger it becomes, the less control Eala has over the story surrounding her. Chapter 2. When hype creates resistance. The first layer of the backlash looks harmless. Hype. Every rising athlete experiences it. But hype has a strange side effect. The moment thousands of people start saying that a player is special, another group begins asking whether the excitement has gone too far. Alex Eala has reached that stage. After major victories, social media fills with celebration. Fans start imagining how high she can climb. They talk about future tournaments. They compare her progress with established players. They start discussing the future before the present has even finished. For Filipino supporters, that excitement is understandable. They are watching something they have rarely experienced in elite women's tennis. But now imagine the same conversation from the outside. You are a neutral tennis fan. Maybe you support another player. Maybe you have followed the WTA for years. Then suddenly, your feed is filled with Alex Eala. One post becomes 10. 10 becomes 50. Every victory becomes historic. Every strong performance becomes proof. Every ranking jump creates another prediction. Eventually, some neutral fans stop reacting to Eala the player. They start reacting to the hype around Eala. That distinction is important, because once someone becomes annoyed by the hype, the easiest target is often the person whose name appears inside it. If Eala loses, critics can say the fans exaggerated her level. If she wins, supporters respond even louder. Then the next argument becomes bigger. But Eala herself does not need to make any of those comparisons. She does not need to declare herself better than another star. She does not need to claim every victory changes tennis history. Other people can do all of that for her, and she can still receive the backlash. That is how hype becomes resistance. Not everyone criticizing the hype is attacking Eala, but online, that difference can disappear very quickly. Someone says the attention is excessive. A supporter hears that as disrespect. The supporter responds aggressively. Now the critic becomes annoyed by both the hype and the fan base. Another supporter enters, another critic answers. Within minutes, the original tennis discussion disappears. Now people are defending identities. And once that happens, the argument becomes much harder to control. Chapter 3. When the fanbase becomes part of the story. The second layer moves beyond predictions and into the stadium. One of the most powerful parts of the Eala effect is the crowd. When Eala plays in North America, Filipino supporters can completely change the atmosphere. You see flags, you hear her name. You feel the emotional reaction after important points. For a young player from the Philippines, that level of support is extraordinary. Imagine traveling through the professional tour and discovering supporters waiting for you in city after city. That energy becomes part of the story. But tennis also has its own traditions. There are moments when crowds explode. There are also moments when players expect silence. Between serves. During points. When a player is preparing to continue, most fans understand that. But it only takes a small number of people getting carried away for the entire atmosphere to become controversial online. Then a familiar pattern begins. Some reactions complain about the crowd. Others defend the atmosphere as passionate support. Someone turns the disagreement into an argument about respect. Now the discussion is no longer about one moment during one match. It becomes a debate about an entire fan base. That is where the damage begins. Millions of ordinary supporters can behave perfectly, but ordinary behavior rarely becomes viral. Nobody starts a giant argument because a fan waited quietly for the next point. The extreme moment travels, the angry reaction travels, the confrontation travels, and suddenly, people who never watched the full match believe they understand the entire crowd. Then the association forms. Eala equals loud fans. Eala equals annoying fans. Eala equals controversy. Even when Eala herself had nothing to do with it. That is one of the most unfair parts of fame. The larger the fan base becomes, the more likely people are to judge the athlete through the behavior of the loudest supporters. And Alex Eala has another layer that makes this even stronger: national pride. For many Filipino fans, supporting Eala is not only about tennis. Her victories can feel personal. Her success can feel symbolic. That creates powerful loyalty. But it also means criticism can feel more personal than normal. A comment about tennis can become an argument about respect. A disagreement about hype can become an argument about identity. And once identity enters the conversation, emotions rise quickly. That does not mean passionate support is the problem. The problem begins when the most extreme voices are treated as if they represent everyone. Chapter 4. The outrage machine. Then comes the third layer, and this one may be the most important. Once a name becomes valuable online, controversy attached to that name can also become valuable. Alex Eala becomes more famous. More people search for her. More people watch clips about her. More people click stories with her name. That creates an obvious opportunity for dramatic content. A claim involving Eala and another famous person can attract attention. Maybe the claim sounds insulting. Maybe it suggests jealousy. Maybe it creates conflict where very little existed. The exact story can quickly become less important than the reaction. Fans become angry. Critics join in. People share the post because they believe it. Other people share it because they want to attack it. Then someone tries to correct the story. But the dramatic version may already be traveling faster. That is the trap. Truth usually needs context. Outrage only needs a sentence. And once the outrage begins, almost everyone participating helps distribute it. Fans defending Eala create engagement. Critics attacking Eala create engagement. People arguing about whether a claim is true create engagement. The platform does not need to understand why everyone is angry. It only sees activity, comments, shares, reactions, attention. And attention keeps the conflict alive. Now place Eala in the middle of that system. She can play well and create discussion. She can lose and create discussion. Her fans can celebrate and create discussion. A few fans can behave badly and create discussion. Someone can exaggerate a story involving her and create discussion. She does not even need to participate. That is the disturbing part. The controversy can continue without the person at the center of it. And that leads to the biggest question in this story. What if Alex Eala is not actually the source of the Alex Eala controversy? Look at the cycle. Eala wins, fans celebrate, the hype grows, critics push back. Supporters defend her. The argument creates more visibility. More visibility creates more extreme reactions. Then the cycle begins again. Success creates attention. Attention creates resistance. Resistance creates defense. Defense creates visibility. Visibility creates more opportunities for conflict. The bigger Eala becomes, the more powerful that cycle can become. And there is no simple way for her to win that game. Ignore it, and the conversation continues without her. Respond to it, and the response becomes another story. Win matches, and the hype becomes louder. Lose matches, and critics say they were right. At that point, the internet seems capable of turning almost any result into another argument. Chapter 5. Hate or polarization. But here is the twist. Maybe Alex Eala does not have a hate problem in the way it first appears. Maybe she is experiencing something that happens when an athlete becomes impossible to ignore. Polarization. There is a difference. When Eala was still a promising player climbing through the rankings, people who did not care about her had an easy option. They ignored her. They did not need to criticize her. They did not need to argue about her supporters. They did not need to compare her with their favorite player. She simply was not part of their tennis world. Then the victories became bigger. Her ranking climbed. Filipino support became more visible. Media attention increased. Videos spread faster. Ignoring her became harder. That changes the way people react. Before a breakthrough, people mostly judge the player. After the breakthrough, people start judging the entire phenomenon around the player. And Alex Eala is becoming a phenomenon. Some people are no longer reacting to Alex Eala, the tennis player. They are reacting to Alex Eala, the conversation. They see constant praise. They see national pride. They see comparisons. They see passionate supporters filling comment sections. Then resistance appears. Not necessarily because Eala did something wrong. Sometimes people simply push back when they feel a narrative is moving too quickly. That is where criticism of hype can quietly become criticism of the athlete. And once that process begins, there is rarely a neutral match anymore. A win means supporters were right. A loss means critics were right. Every result becomes evidence in an argument. That is one of the dangers of rapid fame. The athlete stops being allowed to simply develop. Every tournament becomes a referendum. Every opponent becomes a comparison. Every bad set becomes a warning. Every great week becomes proof of destiny. But Eala is still developing while the conversation around her accelerates. Her career moves one match at a time. The internet moves one reaction at a time. Those are completely different speeds. A tennis career requires patience. Social media rewards immediacy. A player can need months to improve a weakness. The internet can decide what that weakness means almost instantly. A player can need years to establish consistency. Fans and critics can decide her entire future after one tournament. That is why the darkest part of the Eala effect may not actually be hate. It may be the pressure to choose a side. You are either a believer or you are a hater. You either think she is destined for greatness or you think she is overrated. But real careers are not that simple. A player can be special and still struggle. A player can be improving and still lose badly. A player can have enormous potential without being ready to dominate today. All of those things can be true at the same time. But complexity rarely creates the loudest discussion. Extreme opinions do. So the middle disappears. And Eala becomes more polarized even if Eala herself has not changed. That leads to the biggest reframing in the entire story. Maybe hate is not always the opposite of popularity. Sometimes it is a side effect of relevance. People rarely spend hours arguing about athletes they believe do not matter. They argue when someone becomes important enough to challenge an existing opinion, important enough to threaten another favorite player, important enough to receive attention that someone thinks belongs elsewhere, important enough that the conversation keeps appearing whether people want it or not. That does not excuse toxic behavior. Abuse is still abuse. Personal attacks are still wrong. Being famous does not make cruelty acceptable. But understanding the mechanism matters, because simply saying that people hate Eala because they are jealous misses the real story. The real story is much more interesting. Alex Eala has become important enough to create opposing reactions. Chapter 6. What the backlash really means. So why is Alex Eala getting so much hate? The answer is that there probably is not one single reason. Some people are criticizing the hype. Some are reacting to the behavior of a small number of vocal fans. Some are tired of constant comparisons. Some are reacting to crowd behavior. Some are trolling because controversy attracts attention. And some criticism is not hate at all. That distinction matters. Because if every negative opinion gets placed inside one giant category called hate, we stop understanding what is actually happening. Eala is standing at the center of several powerful forces: success, national pride, fandom, rivalry, media attention, social media outrage. Those forces do not always move in the same direction. The same victory that makes Filipino supporters proud can frustrate fans of the players she defeated. The same crowd that gives Eala energy can annoy someone who thinks a few supporters went too far. The same prediction that excites one person can sound ridiculous to another. Then people begin fighting about Alex Eala, even when Alex Eala herself has done almost nothing to create the fight. That is the dark side of the Eala effect. The bigger her name becomes, the less control she has over what other people do with it. But there is another truth hidden inside that reality. Indifference is quiet. Relevance is loud. People rarely spend this much energy arguing about athletes they believe are completely irrelevant. Eala has reached the stage where people expect something. Supporters expect breakthroughs. Critics expect reality checks. Neutral fans expect proof. Opponents expect a serious match. That is a very different world from being a promising young player nobody is preparing for. And if Eala keeps rising, the scrutiny will probably become even stronger. More victories will create more expectations. Bigger tournaments will create more attention. Larger crowds will create more discussion. A higher ranking will give opponents even more reason to study her carefully. That may be the real challenge ahead. Not whether Alex Eala can win every argument. She cannot. Not whether she can convince every critic. She will not. The real challenge is whether she can keep developing while millions of people argue about what she already represents. Her job remains much simpler than the environment surrounding her. Play, improve, win when possible, learn when she loses, let the results build the story. And perhaps the fan base has its own challenge. Support her without turning every match into proof of greatness. Celebrate historic moments when they actually happen. Defend her when criticism becomes unfair. But leave enough space for Alex Eala to grow like a real athlete. Not a perfect symbol, because the strongest version of the Eala effect will not come from louder arguments. It will come from more tennis, more wins, more difficult opponents, more important matches, more moments that nobody needs to exaggerate. Conclusion: the real dark side of the Eala effect. So, maybe the strangest thing about the backlash around Alex Eala is this: the more closely you look at it, the less it appears to begin with something Alex Eala actually did. It begins with everything happening around her: the rapid rise, the enormous support, the national pride, the expectations, the comparisons, the victories over famous players, the fan base, the online arguments, and the uncomfortable moment when a promising underdog stops being harmless and starts becoming a threat. Success changes the rules. Opponents prepare differently. Fans expect more. Critics watch more closely. Every victory creates stronger belief. Every loss gives skeptics another argument. The same attention that turns an athlete into a star also gives thousands of people a reason to judge every step. That is the real dark side of the Eala effect. And if Alex Eala keeps winning, that pressure is not going to disappear. It will probably become louder. Because the higher she climbs, the more important the matches become. The more important the matches become, the more emotional the reactions become. The more visible the fan base becomes, the more resistance it can create. That is what happens when a sporting story becomes bigger than results. And Alex Eala may already be reaching that point. A few years ago, the challenge was getting people to notice her. Now people are watching closely enough to argue about how good she really is. That alone tells you how much has changed. So when you see criticism surrounding Alex Eala, ask one question: are people really reacting to Alex Eala herself? Or are they reacting to the enormous phenomenon growing around her? Because those are not the same thing. And the difference may explain almost everything. Eala does not need to prove every supporter right. She does not need to prove every critic wrong. She needs to keep becoming a better tennis player while everyone else fights over the meaning of every result. The world has already reached the stage where it cannot easily ignore Alex Eala. Now comes the harder stage. What happens when everyone keeps watching? If the Eala effect becomes even bigger, the answer may be much louder than anything we have seen so far.